of Mark today. Before we get there, a couple comments to get us in the right mind for this. The word Christian means to be Christ-like, right? We come together and we celebrate, we get baptized, we profess the name of Jesus. We make a commitment to be Christ-like, to be followers of Christ, to commit to do as he instructed, to live as he lived. The final instruction that he leaves us, that he left his followers before he left this earth, we find in Matthew chapter 28, starting in verse number 17. It says, "And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Jesus came and said to them, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Amen.'" The final thing that Jesus says before he leaves this place is, if you desire to be a follower of me, if you desire to be Christ-like, right? If you've committed yourself unto me, if I am the Lord of your life, this is what you need to be doing. You need to be going into all the world and making disciples of other Christians, of the nations. You need to be baptizing them in my name, in my Father's name, in the name of the Holy Spirit, right? Baptizing them into the faith, right? The commitment to the faith that I have taught you. You need to be teaching them to observe the things that I have commanded you. And you need to be doing all of this with the recognition that it is by my authority that you do it. It is my power and my governance over your life that you're submitting to in order to accomplish these things. And I appreciate John bringing that up for us Wednesday night and helping us to remember, that is our calling. That is the responsibility that we have. The question then is, if this is our responsibility, if we are to be people that go out and make disciples, if we are to be relational people that bring people into understanding of who God is and what he has taught and having a more intimate relationship with Christ in their life, how do we go about doing that? And I think for many people that is a very frightening thing. That can be an intimidating thing. Sometimes we struggle with self-doubt. I don't really know if I'm the person to be doing this, right? We have pastors and they've gone to school. We have people that are being paid to handle those things. I don't really know the Bible well enough. I know my past, and if they knew my past, they wouldn't want to follow me. And we have these doubts that we struggle with. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, right? Jesus says, "Go and make disciples of all nations." There's a lot of nations, right? There's a lot of people in the world. And it can be difficult to go and to say, man, do I have to teach everybody? Do I have to lead everybody? Is there this? It can be overwhelming to feel like you have to be a light unto the entire world. We see this intimidation come up often. More often than not, you will never hear a church go more quiet than when the request of, "Do we have any volunteers for Sunday school teachers?" Right? Not me, right? Sister so-and-so is not here. Let's put her in the class, right? And there's this fear, right, to be a teacher. But the calling of Christianity, right? After salvation, then what? The calling is to be a teacher, to be a disciple, to be a mentor. I am a part of the millennial generation, and often we are the butt of many jokes, right? But if I can just share the mentality, the zeitgeist, the feeling that so many in my generation have, is that we are a disciple-less generation. We're a generation that has not been reared up, that we have not been taught, we have not been given direction. And we have so many young people that feel like young people, almost 30 people, right? We have so many younger people that feel like they're getting yelled at for not knowing anything by the people who didn't teach them anything. And that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking. And this is not how it should be in the Church of Christ. We have a greater responsibility than that. And so the question is, how do we go about teaching? And I want to give you guys some encouragement in that through looking at the life of Christ. I think we're going to find that discipleship, it is a stern responsibility, but it is something that is manageable. It's something that you can accomplish. And it's probably not as overwhelming as you think it is. And if you will give the time to it, if you will invest your life into it, spectacular things can happen from it. And we're going to learn this not only by looking at Christ, but also by looking at three men that were very prevalent in the life of Christ. That is Peter, James, and John. Looking at the relationship that Jesus had with these people. And as we go through this, not only are we going to look at what it takes to be a mentor, to disciple others, but we're also going to look at what does it take to be mentored. Right? So much of the Christian relationship is, I always think of Paul. You know, Paul had Barnabas who was instructing him and teaching him and raising him up. But then Paul also had, Thomas and Titus, and he was raising them up. Often we find ourselves where we have those who have gone on before us that are instructing us, and those who are coming up while we are instructing them. So it's like they kind of say with education, you never stop learning, right? You never stop growing in that. And that is the same in the church as well. So without further ado, let's go into this and see how Jesus discipled others and how they were discipled, what we can learn from that. We're going to start in Mark chapter number 1, verses 16 through 20. Give everybody a second to turn there. Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through 20, it says, "Now as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And Jesus said unto them, Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. And straightway they forsook their nets and followed him. And when he had gone a little further thence, he saw James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, who also were in the ships mending their nets. And straightway he called them. And they left their father Zebedee in the ship with the hired servants and went after him." Here we see the beginning of the discipleship call of Jesus Christ. And the call is very straightforward. The call is very plain. Come and follow me. Right? And what did James and John have to do? What did Peter have to do? What did Simon have to do? Andrew have to do? They left their nets behind. They left their normal jobs behind to go and to commit themselves unto following Christ. A couple things that we can learn here, a couple very important things. First and foremost, we see discipleship did not take place in a classroom. Discipleship did not take place in a classroom. And in the church, more often than not, that's where we try to relegate it into our classroom time. And I don't want to take away from the classroom time. A lot of my time is classroom time and is instructing, right? I don't want to talk myself out of the job here. Classroom time is important because that's when you can get some of the most direct, non-distracting, one-on-one education. But there's a world of difference in being told something and being shown something, right? And the call from Jesus was not, hey, come, let's meet once a week and we'll go through and I'll get up here and I'll preach for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and we'll have these lessons and I'll send you guys off on your homework and we'll come back and we'll make sure we talk about this and, I have your stickers for attendance and all. No. It was come and follow me. Right? We're going to go to the same towns together. We're going to talk to the same people together. We're going to have lunch together. We're going to do the same jobs together. We're just going to go and we're going to live life. And as we live life together, you are going to learn from me. You see, you have character that you need from me, right? You are lacking character that you need from me. And the only way to get that character is by spending time with me and absorbing that from me, right? Again, you can be told it all of your life, but until you experience it, it's a very different thing. And so Jesus doesn't say, come and learn from me once a week, but he says, follow me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. As a mentor, you have to be prepared to share in the mess of life with others. And I think that is one of the most intimidating barriers we hit up front, is mentorship says, look, I'm going to invite you to be a part of my life. Right? I'm going to invite you to come and experience and learn from me. And that invitation is a huge deal because now we're going to say I'm going to teach you the right way to do things in your life. And so suddenly that means, the way that you treat the waitress becomes very important, right? The way that you treat the cashier becomes very important. The way that you interact with your wife or your husband and your kids become very important. Suddenly everything that you're doing in your life becomes very important because everything that you do in your life is a teachable moment. But that is the calling that Christ gave to these men, to come and to share in the mess of life with him. On the other side, if we want to grow, if we want to be discipled, one of the things that we have to be prepared to do is to give up a normal life. Right? To give up our natural life in order to take part in someone else's life. That can be, again, a little bit intimidating, but who among us wants to have a normal life, right? We think about this all the time, and it seems like always, I just wish everything would go normal for once. Lee and I express this sometimes. We're like, I don't know, have you ever said like, man, I just wish my family was normal, right? There is no normal family, right? There's always the mess, but no one wants normal. I've shared this before, like 50% of marriages end up in divorce. You want a normal marriage? No, I want an exceptional marriage, right? Most Americans are like just keeping their head above debt. You want a normal bank account? No, I want an exceptional bank account, right? The only time we ever want normal is when we're like really bad at something, right? Like I wish I was just a normal singer, right? I'm a very bad singer, and I wish I could just be normal. So discipleship, mentorship is saying like, look, there are things in my life that I'm lacking. And if I keep going my way without inviting someone else into my life to teach me, to instruct me, to shake up my routine, to shake up my schedule, to shake up my natural behavior in the way that I normally do things, unless I invite someone into my life to shake that up, all I'm going to have is a normal life. I'm just going to be who I would normally be. And Jesus says, no, we're not doing normal here. We're doing exceptional, right? And that's why God has called us all together and to be a part of one another's life. Is because what I lack, other people provide, right? Where I lack in, maybe being, I find this so often in my marriage, like Leah is my social lubricant, right? Like she's the one that helps me to break out of my shell and to be interactive and to be sociable instead of just like staying in my room all the time that I would normally do. Like God has designed that in our relationships. You can probably see that in your spouse. We also see that in our churches too, that we come and we all lift each other up. So discipleship requires breaking out of the normal. It requires sharing in the mess of life. It requires calling others to follow and holding them to that responsibility. Oh my gosh, where did all the time go? Okay, so let's go to Mark chapter number 1, verse 29 through 32. I look down, it's 11:50. Okay, so Mark 1, chapter 29, verse 32. It says, "And forthwith, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew and James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick of fever, and anon they tell him of her. And he came and he took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she ministered unto them. And at even when the sun did set, they brought unto him all that were diseased and all that were possessed of devils." We could go on and talk about that, but I just want to point out here to move on quickly that already in Jesus' ministry, if you follow the gospel, if you follow the story of the gospel, this is before Jesus said, "These are my 12 disciples." And yet, who do we see him interacting with and spending time with? Peter, James, and John. Something important to see is that Jesus chose these men very early. He said, I'm going to be a part of your life, right? I pick you out to be a part of my life and to be a part of my responsibility. Want to say here, discipleship does not happen by accident, right? Discipleship does not happen by accident. Be intentional about calling out people, about calling out young people. We have a couple coaches in here. And one thing I really appreciate about our coaches is I've seen a drive in them to be intentional about calling others out, right? Vance, that's something Vance does really well, is like seeing the young people that he can make a difference in their life and say, I'm going to call you out. I'm going to hold you to a higher standard. I appreciate that so much. That's a responsibility for all of us. Whom God reveals to you that says, look, that's a person that you can change. That's a person that you can lift up. Don't run away from that calling. Say, I'm going to commit unto this. So pick them out early. Make that relationship early. Make discipleship intentional. Don't wait for it to accidentally happen. So now that you have some people in mind, hey, who am I going to have this relationship with? What does that relationship look like? Let's go to Mark chapter number 3. Mark chapter 3, verses 13 through 19. It says, and Jesus went up into a mountain, and he called unto him whom he would, and they came unto him. And he ordained 12 that they should be with him, that he might send them forth to preach. So here Jesus is sending out his 12 disciples. And it says in verse 15, to have the power to heal sickness and to cast out devils. And let's see who he names. Verse 16, and Simon he surnamed Peter, and then James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, and he surnamed them Boanerges, which is the sons of thunder. And Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus and Simon the Canaanite and Judas Iscariot, which also betrayed them. And they went into a house. So we see here Jesus calling and sending out his 12 disciples. But did you notice who he put first? Peter, Andrew, James, and John. These are the people that he's already been committed to and had a pretty direct relationship. And there's even something kind of interesting going on here. Peter also had a brother, right? Peter's brother was Andrew. But James and John are together. But it's Peter, James, John, and then also Andrew and the rest of the disciples, right? So even among the brothers, like Jesus had this special relationship with Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Here we see not only is he giving them a direction, but he's directing them to a work. Verse number 14, it says, he ordained the 12 that they should be with him. And what are they supposed to do? That he might send them forth to preach, have the power to heal sickness, and to cast out devils. As a mentor, one of the best things that you can do, whether you're a parent and you're just discipling your child, whether you're a coach and you're discipling another young person, a teacher discipling a student, whether you're just giving discipleship to a young person growing up in this world or a young Christian, one of the most valuable things that you can do for that person is to help them to discover the work that they need to be doing with their life, right? Help them, in particular in the church, help them to discover what their calling and their responsibility in church is. We have, the statistic is it's something like 50 to 60% of young people, after they get out of high school, they never come back to church, right? They just walk away. My faithfulness in church, one of the things that has kept me the most grounded in church is no matter what church I've been in, almost since I've been a teenager, I've had some service within that church. I've had teaching, I've had devotions. I learned at a very young age because of people discipling me and raising me up. Like, people were telling me at church camp, hey, TJ, when are you going to surrender to this call to preach? Before I even realized that I had a call to preach. Like, other people saw it in me and were drawing that out of me and helping me to realize that. And that has kept me faithful in church for the near 30 years that I've been alive now. Having a purpose, having a responsibility, having a work will drive you like so many other things can't. It's so easy if you don't have a responsibility just to get up and be like, man, it is real early on a Sunday. I think I'm just going to hit the snooze a couple dozen more times, right? Once you have that responsibility, once other people are relying on you, that relationship changed. And so very early on, Jesus set them to a work. He helped them to discover that work. And he also equipped them for that work, right? He gave them the power and the ability to go out and to fulfill that work. So he called them to follow him. He picked them out early. He directed them to a work. Now let's go over to Mark chapter number 5. Actually, we're going to go ahead. We're going to go to Mark chapter number 9. Mark chapter number 9, verses 1 through 8. It says, and he said unto them, verily I say unto you, that there be some of them here which shall not taste of death till they have seen the kingdom of God come with power. And after 6 days Jesus taketh with him Peter and James and John, and leadeth them up into a high mountain, apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his raiment became shining, exceeding white as snow, so as no fuller on earth can white them. And there appeared unto them Elias with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And Peter answered and said to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. For he wist not what to say, for they were sore afraid. And there was a cloud that overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud, saying, This is my beloved Son, hear him. And suddenly, when they looked round about, they saw no man any more, save Jesus only with themselves. And they came down from the mountain. And as they came down from the mountain, he charged them that they should tell no man the things that they had seen till the Son of Man was risen from the dead. So here we see Jesus taking Peter, Andrew, James, and John on top of a mountaintop and transfiguring himself before them, revealing the full glory of God before their eyes. And you might be thinking like, TJ, I thought you said this was going to be easy. Like, how do we do that, right? How do we reveal the glory of God? Because none of us can do this. None of us are God. And if we completely reveal ourselves to other people, people are going to find faults. People are going to find problems in us. But the reality is, like, even with our faults, we can still reveal the glory of God to others. We can still lead others into an intimacy with God. Every leader that I've had in my life, hopefully this doesn't come across too harsh, but every leader I've had in my life, it is not difficult to find the flaws that they have in their life. It's not. But God is greater than our flaws, and God is greater than our shortcomings, right? God works all things together for good to those who love the Lord, to those who are called according to a purpose. Even our shortcomings, God uses that to say, like, look, we just talked about this 2 weeks ago. This is how you deal with failure. This is how you deal with shortcomings. There's a Christian way to handle sin. There's a Christian way to handle defeat. All of that is part of it. And so as a mentor, as a disciple, our job is not to be perfect. You don't have to be intimidated by that. Your job is not to be perfect. Your job is simply to reveal the glory of God, reveal the greatness of God, to lead someone to be more intimate with God in their relationship. And that is something all of us can do regardless of the flaws that we have. So we see Jesus personally revealing the glory of God to them. Then we're going to go on just 2 more points here. 2 more points. There we go. Mark chapter number 13. It says, and as he went, starting in verse number 1, it says, as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples saith unto him, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here. And Jesus answering said unto them, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives over against the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew asked him privately, Tell us, when shall these things be? And when shall be the sign of all these things shall be fulfilled? And Jesus answering them began to say, Take heed lest any man deceive you. And he goes on to teach about the end times, to teach about his return, to teach about what his victory over the earth is going to be like. But all of this started from a pretty simple question. They were going out about, they see the temple and like, look at how great this temple is. Look at how wonderful this temple is. Our people who just went to Israel, when you walk around Jerusalem, isn't there times you're like, wow, like people built this, people made this. And this is what they were doing. They're going about saying like, wow, look at how glorious this is. And Jesus says, look, you guys don't understand. All of this is going to be torn down. They said, what? Like, God is going to allow his temple to be torn down in his capital? Like, what's going on there? And so they had these questions. They had moments of doubt, moments of not understanding. And instead of Jesus saying, look, you guys don't need to worry about it. You're not in charge of it. How dare you have any doubts? Instead he says, okay, let's talk about this, right? This is so important for mentorships. As a mentor, be prepared to patiently and lovingly wrestle with tough issues together. Do not make a person that you have responsibility over afraid to show any doubt or afraid to show any disagreement or afraid to speak up and say, I don't understand this. If a person gets to the point where they say, I can't trust you enough to voice these things, you've lost that person. I've seen people walk away from the faith because of this. I've seen people leave our association because of this. Because leaders, great leaders that maybe I should say great teachers, men who knew the Bible front and back, yet intimidated people so much that they didn't feel like they could be open and they could be vulnerable, drove those people away. Discipleship is not about being right all the time, right? Discipleship is the patience to say, look, over time, I'm going to help you grow in this. Over time, I'm going to help you get there. And Jesus was willing to do that. He was willing to meet them at their questions and provide answers. One last thing, and then we'll be able to send you guys home today. Mark chapter number 14. Mark chapter 14, verses 32 through 42. It says, they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he saith to his disciples, sit ye here while I pray. And he taketh with him Peter, James, and John. This is before, moments, hours before Jesus is about to be crucified. He's going to take his disciples away and say, guys, we need to pray. He takes his 12 and he sets them to the responsibility, and then who does he take aside? Peter, James, and John. These are the guys that have been there with him from the beginning. These are the guys that, two of them literally left their dad sitting in the boat with a net to say, we're going to go follow Jesus, right? Okay? These are the guys that, his ride or dies with you to the end. I'm going to follow you. And says, okay, guys, I need you to pray with me right now. He goes and says in verse 34, my soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death. Tarry ye here and watch. And he went forward a little, and he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. And he cometh, and he findeth them sleeping. He says unto them, Peter, Simon, why are you sleeping? Couldn't you just stay up for 1 hour? Wake up. We need you to pray. We need you to give your spirit to this time. This is about to be the most trying time you've ever gone through. We need you to pray. He steps away again in verse number 39. He went away and he prayed and he spake the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were very heavy. Neither wits they what to answer him. So he comes and he says, why are you guys sleeping? And I know I did this so much as a kid, and I can only imagine how frustrating it is as a parent. You ever, catch your child doing something wrong? And it's like, why did you do this? Why did you think playing baseball in the living room was a good idea? What do they say? I don't know. Yes, you do. You just don't want to say. And that's what these guys were here. Why couldn't you stay awake? I don't know. I don't know what to say here. And so you can imagine, Jesus might be frustrated with them, but he leaves them as they are. He comes back in verse 41. Then he cometh to him the third time, and saith unto them, sleep on now, and take your rest. Is it enough? It is enough. The hour is come. Behold, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise up, let us go. He that betrayeth me is at hand. We go on, and we know the rest of the story here. We know that, Simon, at first, Peter pulls a sword to defend Jesus, and Jesus is like, Simon, you don't understand what's going on here. Put your sword away. All of a sudden, Peter realizes, we're not fighting this, and he runs away. And the disciples abandon Jesus. They leave him. We know the famous story of Peter looking on outside of where Jesus is being interrogated and lying about his relationship with him, right? We see Peter, after all of this is done, Jesus is crucified, and Peter gets the other disciples together. You know what he says? I'm going fishing. And that's not like, oh man, I'm going to go take a day off. No, he's saying, you know, when we left them back on the shore of Galilee, you know how I left my job to do all of this? I'm done with it. I'm going home. I'm going fishing. We might look at that and we say, did Jesus fail here? It'd be really easy in that moment and to look at that discipleship and look at that relationship and say that is a failure, right? 11 of his disciples betrayed him. One of them had him murdered. That's a failure. Galatians chapter 2. Verse number 9. Written by a man named Paul, having experienced his entire life being turned around by meeting Jesus on the road to Damascus, enters into the church as a former persecutor of the church, right? So one who was an enemy coming in with fresh eyes. And let's see what Paul has to say of the church that he entered into. It says, and when James and Cephas, it's another name for Peter, and John, who seemed to be pillars in the church, perceived the grace that was given unto me. They gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go unto the heathen and unto the circumcision. When Paul enters into the church, who does he find leading the church? leading a church during the time of persecution, leading the church in a time where the leader had been persecuted, resurrected, left the earth. Who does he find standing as bedrocks, as pillars of the church? Peter, James, and John. 3 people that Jesus had been pouring all of that time into, right? These are the men that later, the leaders are saying, these guys are turning the whole world upside down, right? Has these 3 men made an impact on the lives that we live today? We have this word because of it, right? This all came what? Out of the discipleship that Jesus had with them, the interactions that Jesus had with them. And again, it can be this intimidating thing because we feel like, oh, we have to go and lead hundreds of people. No, Jesus had a very close relationship with 3 people, and it changed the world. It changed the world. Is that something that you can do? I certainly think so, right? That is our calling. When he says, go and to make disciples unto all nations, he's not saying all of us, like, okay, Leah, you're responsible for Nigeria. You better go get all of that, right? Like, you got Brazil and you got Argentina. No. Can you find 3 people? Like, the importance is not, like, the width of our relationship, but the depth of that relationship. To invite someone in and say, come and live life with me. Jesus did all of this in 3 years, right? 3 years, 3 people. Turns the world upside down with his relationship with them. Guys, we had to go through this quick today, but the tools are there. The tools are available for us. The reward is amazing. The only question is, where's the will? Where is the will? Because it's very easy to say, look, I'm just going to spend the rest of my day going to my job, coming home, watching Netflix, making sure dinner's on the table, rinse, wash, repeat until I die. You can do that. It's a very normal life. Jesus didn't call us to a normal life, but to this exceptional life of discipleship. Invite you guys to take place in that. As we go into this time of invitation, that's exactly what we're inviting you to do. Consider, think, who in your life has God called me to discipleship? A lot of you guys have children. That's the great place to start, right? If you don't have children, who can you raise up? Who can you lead? Some of you guys, your children are out of the house, and you don't get to say, okay, discipleship's done, right? No, find someone else. We have young people that need that lifted up, that mentorship, that discipleship. So surrender unto that. We might have some people in here today that have never surrendered in the first place. And if that's your calling, like, hey, no better time than now to say, look, I want to learn. As Jesus called the disciples, come and follow me, learn from me. Come, I'll take you with your doubts, I'll take you with your struggles, I'll take you with your messiness, and even if it looks like you're going to be a failure, I'll still take you, right? Like, he did that and was patient with them, and look at what he turned them into, right? So I encourage you guys, surrender unto that today. Miss Lorraine. God, we come before you today just praying we can be people obedient to the call that Christ has laid upon our life, Lord. For any here who have not surrendered, God, I pray that today would be the day of surrendering. But God, I know that I'm in a church surrounded by brothers and sisters in Christ, those who have committed their life unto you, those who said, we will be followers of Christ, and this is the commandment that you've left us, to go and to make disciples. God, I know today we very quickly just had to look over one of the most amazing relationships that we see in the Bible, this relationship between you and 3 men, and how even through their struggles, even through their failures, even through their shortcomings, you were patient and loving unto them. You held them to a higher standard. You required more from them, and they turned the world upside down. God, I pray for my brothers and sisters here today. I pray first and foremost for a humble and surrendered heart. I pray that they would answer this call to mentorship, answer this call to discipleship. I pray that even now you would open their eyes who you've put in their life that they can raise up, that they can lift up, that they can lead into a more intimate and personal relationship with you. God, I pray that you would give us the grace, the commitment to be a mentor, to disciple others. God, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of love. God, it takes more than any of us have to give. But God, you have enabled us to meet the call to rise to it. God, I pray that we would be dependent on you in all these things, and that through obedience to your word, not only would your will be done upon this earth, but your victory would be shown unto the world. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.